Production funding for Ruckus has been provided by gifts from Dave and Jamie Cummings, the Hartwig family, Barbara and Peter Gattermeyer, the Courtney S. Turner Charitable Trust, John H. Mize and Bank of America N.A. co-trustees, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Ruckus, our weekly food for thought fight over the news of the day and the trends of the times. I'm Mike Shannon. The Ruckettes join me shortly in our topics this week. Governor Parsons says no to Clean Missouri. One legislator says no to Kansas City's e-tax. And Democrats say no way to Hillary. Plus, roast and toast. But we start with our Newsmaker segment and focus our attention on Johnson County and what's ahead for the County Commission. Joining me is a veteran of county politics and government, a former councilman and mayor of Overland Park, a former county commissioner, and now getting set to begin his third term as chairman of the Johnson County Commission, Ed Eilert. Mr. Chairman, welcome back to Ruckus. Thank you very much for coming in.
Well, Mike, thank you very much. It's good to be back with you.
Well, you have been doing this kind of work for a long, long time in government and politics in Johnson County. Have you run your last term or run your last election campaign?
Well, my third term is a four-year term. I anticipate that I'll not be a candidate again, but you can never tell.
You may have said that before.
I think
I remember you saying that a time or two ago. The chairman does more than officiate at the county commission meetings. What are some of the other duties?
Well, the responsibilities of the commission and the chairman are outlined in the charter that was passed back in 2000 by the voters, and our primary responsibility is in the policy area. We have a professional management, a county manager, who's responsible for the day-to-day operation of the county. And so we as commissioners are responsible for oversight, approving budgets, and making broad policy decisions.
And I think the county chair is seen as a spokesperson, more or less, for the county government.
I think that's a responsibility that's also mentioned in the charter.
You're going to have a slightly different commission as you begin 2019. You've got a couple of new members, both female. Two of the four who campaigned against incumbents on the board, talking about the problems with an all-male, all-white city or county commission. How do you think things are going to change, if they're going to change at all, with this new membership?
Well, it's been my opportunity in local government to work with many talented ladies in elected positions. And so I'm looking forward to working with Janae and Becky as we proceed over the next 4 years.
I think they are believed to be Democrats, and many of the county commissioners are heretofore Republicans. And one of your colleagues on the commission suggested that maybe county elections in Johnson County ought to be partisan because people generally know what party the candidates are associated with.
Well, one of the issues that was also approved by voters back in 2000 was that county commissioners would run for office nonpartisan without county label. Every 10 years, we have a charter review commission which reviews all aspects of the charter, and I'm sure that provision is going to be well discussed at our next charter review.
What's your thought about it? Do you see any need not to have partisan elections?
Well, it's interesting. When this issue was on the ballot in 2000, I was one of those who opposed going to nonpartisan elections. But I think it's worked very well. Most of the issues that we deal with do not require a party label in order to make sound decisions.
At this early stage of the new year 2019, what do you see developing as the top 2 or 3 issues the county commission will be dealing with?
Well, one of them will be ongoing. In 2018 was very, very active. For instance, we began construction of the new courthouse, a medical examiner's office, and we also began a wastewater project rebuilding of Tomahawk Creek. And those projects, the courthouse and Tomahawk Creek, are about 2.5 to 3 year projects. So those will continue over the next year or 2 years. Also, we began a couple of years ago to work very diligently in the area of mental health and criminal justice. And the National Association of Counties recognized Johnson County as an innovator county for their work in that area. That work will continue, working with our partner cities, working with our school districts in issues that involve mental health.
As you look toward Topeka, what are some of your thoughts about the new legislature and the incoming governor?
Well, it'll be interesting. We've been in this situation before. Kathleen Sebelius was governor, right. And Laura Kelly now. There is I'm not sure what's going to happen. There may be a little more tension.
Well, some of what happens there will be causing difficulties, perhaps, for what you are able to do in county government.
One of the issues that, or there are several issues, but one of the issues that we've talked about last year and again this year is to see if we can get some leeway, some flexibility in the tax lid.
Right.
Areas like mental health services, health services themselves, CAPERS funding, and those issues.
I'm going to have to stop you there, out of time. It's great to see you again. Thank you very much.
Well, Mike, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Johnson County Commission Chairman Ed Eilert. Now let's meet the panel and start a ruckus. Patrick McInerney is a former prosecutor now in private practice with Spencer Fane. Patrick Tuohy is Director of Municipal Policy at the Show Me Institute, a free market think tank. Michelle Watley is founder of the Griot Consulting Group, and Woody Cozad is head of the Cozad Company, a government relations firm. A plethora of Patricks present.
Patrick McCozad.
Yeah, welcome back to the panel and to all of you. It's the first program of the new year, and there is no shortage of topics, both old and new, to talk about, so let's begin. Not all election results are as conclusive as they may seem. Missouri Governor Mike Parson provides a good example. He was elected lieutenant governor, but moved to the top spot when Eric Greitens was forced to resign. Now Parson wants a different result for what was called Clean Missouri by its backers and passed by voters last fall. Parson believes the plan to appoint a so-called nonpartisan demographer to draw the state's legislative districts after next year's census is unconstitutional and should be changed by the state legislature. The process is referred to as repeal and replace, a term not unfamiliar to folks who follow politics. Well, there's much more to the story, but let's start there. Can the Missouri legislature undo what Missouri voters approved? And we start with Patrick Tuohy.
Well, not by themselves. They can put something, a constitutional amendment, before the people, and the people would have to vote on it. So the legislature can get the ball rolling, but it cannot by itself overrule the vote of the people on a constitutional amendment, at least.
Do you think that's going to happen?
I gave up years ago trying to predict what legislatures will do, but I understand and appreciate both sides of the argument. I think the initiative process is important. I think it is necessary and ought to be respected, but that doesn't mean that you want a state to descend into mob rule without protections for individual rights or constitutional process.
So Woody, you spend a lot of time in Jeff City when the legislature's in session. What's going to happen with this Clean Missouri amendment?
Well, I think the Republicans are worried enough about the demographer. The other portions of it they don't like. They figure the courts will strike down anyway as unconstitutional. The demographer worries them because, look, if you look at the interest groups that put up the money for this, they're all liberal groups, just without exception. This is actually the filibuster amendment to restore the filibuster and make it available to Democrats in the Missouri legislature. Because right now, if the Democrats try and filibuster in the Senate, they don't have the votes to keep the filibuster going. The Republicans just have a party line vote and shut them up. They just want to get enough districts to be able to filibuster. The only filibusters that stand up now in the Missouri Senate are run by Republicans who, by the way, were the ones doing most of the filibustering this last session because the Democrats have just given up. There are so few of them. So their real aim, I know some of these people, I represent some of these people, and their real aim is to get just enough more Democratic seats to be able to sustain a filibuster.
So do you think, Michelle, that it's possible to find a demographer who is nonpartisan and will structure these districts in a fair, equitable way?
I mean, I think it's possible. That's the whole point of the amendment, correct? It's to ensure that the redistricting is done in a nonpartisan way, and that people get what they essentially voted for, free and fair elections, and campaign finance reform, all of the things that people have been wanting, which is why they voted for the issue. So that's the point of the amendment, to ensure that.
Well, I understand the point, but can you actually find somebody who is a demographer who has no partisan judgments, who is going to be absolutely accurate and fair in his or her assessments?
I think that that could be left to be seen.
The answer is no.
The answer is no. And let's remember something. Most of these districts have been drawn by the courts, the members of which are chosen by a nonpartisan court system. And they're the ones who drew these districts. And the districts right now heavily favor the Republicans, as does the division of the state. Trump won by 19 points. But that's a nonpartisan group of judges drawing these districts.
And we all know there's no politics in that.
Patrick, I was going to ask you, do you think
Right.
the elections in Missouri have been handled unfairly, the structure of the districts?
Well, circle the date on your calendar, because I agree with what Patrick said. Because, I mean, there's a sweet spot somewhere between the initiative process and the legislature ignoring the will of the people. I don't know exactly where that is, but there needs to be a higher threshold. We've experienced that in Kansas City, heaven knows. When there's a low threshold for the initiative process. But yeah, I mean, I think that process needs to be respected, and we need to figure out where that tipping point is between the will of the people and the ability to.
And that's more of what Governor Parson was talking about, perhaps taking a hard look at
He didn't do a great job,
the number
though.
of initiative
He just kind of tossed out, well, it's either unconstitutional or people don't understand why it's not right. And I don't know what that means.
The idea that we'll use politics to take politics out of politics is so absurd. I mean, the give and take between the popular vote and legislatures is natural. It's what our government was set up to respect, and we ought to let this go. This isn't a failure.
So there has to be another election if this Clean Missouri Amendment's overturned?
Well, there are two things. I mean, number one, they can put something on the ballot. That's another election. If it is it can be overturned that way.
Can the legislature
Parts of
do it by itself?
No.
Okay.
No. This is a constitutional amendment.
Correct.
All they can do is propose another constitutional amendment and put it to a vote of the people.
So we may be talking about Clean Missouri in the
For
future.
a while.
Yeah.
Plus the courts may get involved.
When you say e-tax, some Kansas Cityans think the E stands for essential. Critics might choose egregious. In reality, it stands for earnings and is a 1% income tax on those who live and or work in Kansas City, Missouri. City officials say it's irreplaceable, bringing in $260 million annually and providing about 42% of the city's budget. For not the first time, a Republican state legislator is pushing a bill that would phase out the tax, this time over a decade. Senator Bill Eigel of St. Charles says the tax in Kansas City and St. Louis impacts not only those cities, but the entire state and region. Kansas Cityans continue to approve the tax every 5 years, most recently by 77%. Would you say the state senator is undertaking a noble pursuit or is on a fool's errand? And we start with Patrick McInerney.
I would say that Senator Eigel is Rex Sinkfield's latest crush, because this is, and he is the latest. Last time it was Kurt Schaefer, right, carrying the water for Rex Sinkfield, who has this thing about the earnings tax in Kansas City and in St. Louis. And, it's the same old song. In fact, Woody and I have had this conversation for a long time, a lot of years, about what the e-tax means. I mean, the e-tax funds public safety in Kansas City and in St. Louis. It funds first responders. It is a critical piece of funding for a city like Kansas City. And it's interesting because it's always the bombs being tossed by the guys from wherever Eigel's from, just outside of St. Louis, these tiny jurisdictions that don't understand what it is to be a big and mature city and how to finance a big, mature city. And
Senator Eigel's from St. Charles. That's not.
Weldon Springs, I think he says, which has 5,300 folks. Yeah, and St. Charles, I mean, same point.
Well, he says it not only affects the cities, but the regions and the districts that it encompasses.
Yeah, and he says Kansas City and St. Louis are struggling under the burden of the e-tax that is in place right now. I mean, tell me who's struggling in Kansas City. Tell me how the economy in Kansas City is struggling.
Try to get your streets plowed. You'll understand.
We're gaining residents. We're gaining development. We've got an immense immense amount of development along Main Street, downtown, in the crossroads, and south.
All right, Woody, you served as spokesman for the anti-e-tax campaign last time around, and you've been an outspoken critic of it for years. Summarize for us, if you would, quickly, some of the objections to the e-tax.
Let me just give you one point, because it's this fear campaign that we'll have no cops and firefighters if you do away with the earnings tax, which, as you point out, brings in about $260 million. $251 million is the amount you save if the city of Kansas City spends per person what Indianapolis city government spends. Indianapolis is the median city in the group we compare ourselves with. They're right in the middle of the pack. If instead of being at the top, we spent what the middle of the pack spends, we would save the total amount of revenue that the earnings tax brings in. So what's the earnings tax pay for? Excessive spending that other cities don't engage in. And Indianapolis is a successful city, so is Oklahoma City. They don't have to spend that extra $250 million for some reason.
Michelle, you live in Kansas City, or you're a Kansas City?
I am a Kansas City resident.
Why do other cities in the area not have an earnings tax?
I don't know why other cities don't have the earnings tax, but at the end of the day, the revenue makes up 42% of the city's budget. The people voted for it time and time again, and this is another attempt to circumvent the will of the people by elected officials. Just like with Amendment 1 and Proposition B, we're seeing another attempt for representatives to decide what's best for the people, when people at the local level and in local control have a better understanding of what's needed than those sitting in Jefferson.
It's 42% of the general fund, not of all their spending by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, the budget's somewhere in excess of $1 billion,
right.
I think, overall.
Well up over $1 billion.
42% of the general fund.
But his plan doesn't propose another way to make up those revenues, and that's the problem,
way every
too,
other
right?
big city, the way Indianapolis
Patrick Tuohy, what if Kansas City had to phase out the earnings tax over a decade? Would the city collapse?
No, of course not. It would be perfectly fine. So Woody is right that the most frustrating part about the city's argument is that it is driven by fear. Fear. We can't do this. Now, the city has known about these efforts for 10 years. Didn't have a plan B the first time around. Didn't have a plan B the second time around. They are intentionally stirring up all this fear. Meanwhile, the earnings tax itself is a nightmare. It is absolutely regressive. It hits you on the first dollar earned, and because it's only on earnings, people who are working at McDonald's as a fry cook pay it, whereas people like Rex Sinkfield don't. It is absolutely an unjust tax, and there's a better way that Kansas City can do it.
This is the will of voters here in Kansas City.
If there are all these reasons,
Weldon Springs, Missouri, is opposing the e-tax. I don't understand why Woody opposes it.
Because the city of Kansas City goes down to Jeff City and says, you have to do this for us, you have to do that for us, because we're the economic engine that drives the state. If you are, then you are of interest to everybody in the state. When you're asking for money, and when you're misrunning your city, either way, you're of interest to everybody in the state.
So easy. That's so easy to say, to make those broad statements. And there's talk about no plan B. There's no plan B for anybody if this earnings tax is
eliminated. Is it fair to say that
Indianapolis,
at least
there's not plan B.
We got to thus far, voters have shown no appetite for doing away with the earnings tax in Kansas City?
That's
correct.
Right.
By overwhelming
it
numbers.
always wins in the polls.
And yet, statewide they have.
But if it was a different issue and somebody from outstate was reaching in and trying to meddle with Kansas City or St. Louis, these guys would be going crazy.
We're not going to earn
Local
1%
control
more
everything. Where's
soon,
local
I take it,
control?
all right.
Exactly.
A new survey tells us two things about what Democrats are looking for in a 2020 presidential nominee. First, Democrats are not sure if they want someone shiny and new, a Beto or Kamala, or someone tried and true, Joe or Bernie. Democrats seem to be sure, however, of this. They don't want Hillary Clinton to run for a third term as president, or run a third time for president. Lest you think it is too early to talk about the next presidential race, this observation from Amy Walter of the respected Cook Political Report. Expect Democrats who are running for president to start making their announcements within a month. I think they already have. So, Michelle, what do you see as the future direction of the Democratic Party? Shiny and new, or tried and true?
I think on some level both. That's why you see, rumors of a Biden-Beto ticket surfacing, right? Because that would represent a little bit of both. But I wonder if Dems would go the way of Republicans in 2016 and go with shiny and new. The Republicans in 2016, you had Bush, tried and true, but Trump is what came through. And I wonder if Dems and Democratic voters will go that way in 2016. My gut says yes.
Well, what's your preference?
I think we should go with something shiny and new. When you look at not only shiny and new, but when you look at who's winning races at the local level and what is energizing the base, it's not only shiny and new, it's not necessarily even a blue wave, but you're seeing a black and brown wave. You're seeing more black and brown candidates being elected than ever before and exciting the base. So I think that, some Dems may be confused about why shiny and new is exciting, but tried and true, at least in Missouri, hasn't won.
Let me ask you this. Is shiny and new the same as more progressive?
In some ways, yes. But if we talk about progressive issues or just issues overall, I think that's what's winning. Not necessarily progressive values, but issues. If you look at what happened in Missouri in 2018, all of the ballot issues passed: marijuana, minimum wage, Amendment 1, campaign finance reform, and transparency in government. But the candidates at the top of the ticket who would be likely to support that didn't win. So, I think we're asking at this point, what's the matter with Missouri? Not necessarily what's the matter with Kansas, that's happening.
Patrick McInerney, Democratic voters in this survey make it quite clear they don't think Hillary should try again for the presidency. Do you agree?
Absolutely. She was a terrible candidate.
Why is there such a disdain for that woman?
You know what? It's not disdain for the woman because she was a good public official. When she held public office, she was good and effective, and she worked across the aisle all the time. But there's a broad gap between being an effective government official and being an effective candidate. She was an awful candidate, and my party decided that she had been there and done the time and done the roles and deserved it without looking really anywhere else. And I think that was, we selected one of the few candidates that Trump could beat, and he beat her. It really kind of goes to, I think the Democrats. There's tone deafness on the part of the Democratic Party from a national standpoint about the things that drove people to vote for Donald Trump. Because remember, many of those voters voted for Obama in 2008 and again in 2012, and then turned and voted for Trump. And so that's not an ideological turn. That's a message communication turn.
Patrick, is there no age limit now for people to run for president? Both Biden and Bernie are in their late 70s. Back in 1976, when Ronald Reagan failed to win the Republican nomination in Kansas City, he was 65, and people said that was his last chance. He had no chance to run again, but he did run successfully at 69.
So, of course, there's no law that says you're barred from it.
But do voters have a problem with people as they age?
No, it's the kind of thing that if you don't like somebody, you'll imagine you don't like them because of their age. If you like them, you're willing to overlook their age. I think it's one of those things that pops up that maybe is a talking point but doesn't really drive votes. I think the shocking thing for Pelosi and Biden and Bernie is they're going to find out they're too white for this Democratic Party. And shiny and new may mean more expensive, may mean more progressive, or may mean more black and brown. It's going to be a bloodbath the next 2 years, and I am going to enjoy watching it.
Has Donald Trump been so damaged that he can't win in 2020?
Well, that depends on whether the Democrats decide to self-destruct. You feel at this point almost like saying that whoever wins next time, it's going to be because the other party self-destructed. Steve Glorioso said to Jack Kraft and me a week before the 2016 election, you guys nominated the only person in America who could lose to Hillary Clinton. We nominated the only one who could lose to Donald Trump, and one of them's going to lose.
Okay, now we're going to head to the soapbox for Roast and Toast, where the Ruckettes have 30 seconds each to cheer, sneer, or leer. And we start with Patrick Tuohy.
Well, my toast is very simple. It's to all of Kansas City. It's for a healthy, prosperous, and happy new year. Thank you.
And you spent a lot of time preparing that. Woody.
I actually have a question about the roast for the feminist left, but it's a question. Are you warrior women or are you defenseless flowers? I propose a law that every woman has to wear a badge to say, she gets to choose which she wants to be. But every time I turn on the TV, some woman cop, woman SEAL team member is beating the hell out of some man and knocking him around and putting handcuffs on him, and little girls are being told they can play football and do anything a man does. And then some woman punches a football player and he punches her back and they say, my God, you can't lay a hand on a woman. We're schizoid about this, and so I propose choice. Every woman chooses. I'm either a defenseless flower or I'm a warrior woman, and you wear a little badge. That's it.
Cozad comes out for choice. Patrick.
Wow. So I'm gonna toast Mitt Romney this morning, because Mitt Romney had the insight and the guts to articulate what everybody else in the Republican Party already knows and understands, and everybody who's left the administration feels free to talk about, and that is that this president is completely out of his league and incompetent and ill-suited to be president of the United States. So I salute him this morning and hope that that others hear that call.
All right, Michelle, warrior woman that I know you are.
Yeah, I'm choosing to start the new year off with a roast to the worst Happy New Year's tweet post I think I've ever seen, in which President Trump thanked the haters, wished a Happy New Year's to his haters, the fake media, and those with Trump derangement syndrome. If this is how we're starting 2019, I'm not excited about what's to come. If you want to know if you're too old to run for president or be president, if you're tweeting in all caps to your haters, that might be a sign you're too old to be running for president.
And finally, an association of witches is demanding that President Trump stop calling the Mueller investigation a witch hunt. Their poll numbers are underwater, so the witches believe they have a stake in the battle and are fired up. Trump is not going to give in, so this battle will likely continue for a long spell. And that's Ruckus for this week. We'll be back next Thursday at 7. Now for the Ruckus and the crew, Mike Shannon saying thanks for watching and good night.